Hi everyone, it's Elise Lonsdale from DATA Australasia, and thanks for joining me once again. When I was in New Zealand, I thought I knew it all, well, before I got there. But what I hadn't had experience with was dealing with people who had lost their eyesight in their latter years, senior years, or even middle-aged. How did I learn to cope with that?
DATA Australasia, guided by lived experience, led by you.
Welcome back, and thanks once again for joining us. Yeah, I thought I knew it all. I'm congenital. I've got blindness pouring out of my ears. I know a whole bunch of people who are like me, born congenital, have got, or at least experienced blindness for the first time when they were really young. So by the time they get to my age, they're well and truly adapted. But there are conditions out there such as cataract, macular degeneration, in particular age-related macular degeneration, and of course, retinitis pigmentosa. Now, most of the other conditions such as optic nerve hyperplasia and the condition you get when you're born premature for people of certain generations, glaucoma is a disease of stealth. But a lot of the people I've been brought up with have reasonably, they've suffered, they've had the same amount of vision. The low vision people have had the same amount of vision for most of their life with a very, very gradual decline. So what happens when you get somebody who might be in their 20s and experiencing night blindness, and then in their 30s, they might wind up being diagnosed with a condition called retinitis pigmentosa? And what happens when that person is in their 40s or 50s or even 60s and their sight has really declined to the point of being non-functional? In actual fact, it's hard to predict for the people with RP how quickly their sight might go. And this also holds true for people with Usher syndrome, which is basically the deaf-blind version of retinitis pigmentosa. You're usually born with a hearing impairment, but born fully sighted, and when later life comes along, you've lost your sight or a good deal of it, so you're considered as deaf-blind. That is a dual sensory loss and can be very burdensome for people. In actual fact, one of the things I also learnt in New Zealand was dealing with the grief, the loss of independence that people feel when they are, when they've had, 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 or 7 or even 8 decades fully sightedness, and all of a sudden in their later years they are rendered vision impaired. Because some of the people may even still have better sight than me, but because they've been used to this wonderful 180, 190 degrees field of vision and 20/20 vision and full colour, high definition colour vision, and all of a sudden they've got a splotchy, pale view of the world, especially for the people that with macular degeneration, having to deal with a blind spot, and they've got to do what they call eccentric viewing to get round that blind spot. That vision could still in some ways be better than the vision I've got now. It's just that I've lived with mine all my life, so I'm cool with it. I don't know what it's like to be fully sighted, other than the learning I've done and the theory I've done and the low vision courses I've done, and just talking to very sighted friends that I have. In actual fact, I was explaining to my friend Anik before what I believe it might be like for a person dealing with RP, and I know several people with that condition, and I've been able to talk to them at length. So we've got to cope with the grief. So the language that I use can often be colourful, but there again, I'm dealing with adults, and it really depends on the type of person I'm working with. I've got a new client who's she's got, I'm not quite sure of the exact name of the condition she gave it, but she's just taken to using the iPhone, and she's now looking at buying an iPad because they saw me using the Apple software and hardware with continuity. I started typing up her sessional notes whilst I was with her, and she's very interested in using the Notes app. I find the Notes app a little bit annoying for me because I know of other alternatives. But for the people who are new, the Notes app is a very, very good start. And she saw how I was able to get something that started in Notes from my iPhone through to my iPad, and she has just been blown away with it. I think the next time I visit with this person, they'll have an iPad ready for me to help them with it as well. Now, they're probably going to resist speech. So they're going to use whatever eyesight they've got, and this is typical of people who have lost their eyesight. they're going to want to use the last vestige of that sight. It doesn't matter how bad it is, how poor it gets, they will use it if they have to, if they want to. So it is often very difficult to switch people over to speech because, as I've demonstrated in other videos, and people who know what happens with speech, we change the gesture set on an iPhone. We have to double tap instead of single tap to start an application. We have to swipe from one element to the next. And the person who's doing that doesn't just have to learn the new gesture set, they have to learn to listen. Yep, they have to learn to listen. And we're even finding that with some of our kids, which is why we've developed the speed listening program at my Friday job. We have to get people with eyesight to listen, and many of them don't. It's amazing. So you'll often get people hearing the speech, whether it be on the iPhone or the Android, or even the JAWS NVDA speech or voiceover on the Mac computer, and all they just hear is gobble gobble gobble. And you ask them, "Have you ever tried speech?" When they, "Oh yeah, I tried it once and it annoys me." Right? Why does it annoy you? It just does. So we have a program that assists people to learn to listen to synthetic speech, and we do a lot of comprehension exercises. And obviously we have the speech running at much slower than, say, I would or my peers would. And we can, once they're starting to get comfortable with it, we can crank the speech up. And there are so many different synthesizers around these days that enables us to find the right speech for them. Like with my deaf-blind client, for example, we had to do a little bit of work, and I think I might have said this in one of my other videos. We have to do a little work to see if they like the female Karen voice in the higher register, or whether we want to use a more deeper male voice. Or do we want to use a robotic voice? Or do we want to use even the AI-generated voices, although they don't generally go so well with screen readers. We generally use the AI-generated voices for reading with, say, the reading plain documents that just read without the controls to start, stop, and review. Say, for example, something like 11 Labs. So it's the language that we also have to use. We have to teach people what a dialogue box is, what a checkbox is, what a drop-down combo box is if they're managing the screen reader in Windows. We have to teach people the difference between an edit field where they can type in some text or dictate in some text, and a button to activate maybe the dictation so they can actually dictate. We have to use terms like focus, and you will have seen those other videos that I've done with, it's all about the focus when I was doing that JAWS demo. So we start using this crazy language, and people probably think we're all stark raving mad. Well, guess what? We probably are. But it adds for some colourful conversation, because sometimes I use that colourful conversation to put people at ease. So that's what we're doing here at DATA Australasia, working with people who have had a lack of vision, experiencing it for the first time after several decades of fully sightedness. Remember, they've probably had to hand in their driver's license. They're reliant on friends, family, spouses, informal supports. And if they're on the NDIS, they're relying on formal supports. And the whole world has massively changed and can happen quite quickly, sadly. So on that note, it's food for thought and just yet another topic to make a video on. Thanks for joining me. I'm Elise Lonsdale from DATA Australasia, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks for watching.
For fast, efficient access technology training and support, call Elise Lonsdale from Australia 0448 966 533. That's 0448 966 533. Or from New Zealand on 027 315 2858. That's 027 315 2858. DATA Australasia. Guided by lived experience, led by you.